At my rich mother's funeral, my aunt whispered, "You don't belong here anyway." When I said, "She raised me like her own," she laughed, "She never loved you, she pitied you." But then my cousin pulled out something that shut everyone up. It was mid-July in Charleston, and the air was heavy with the kind of heat that clings to your skin. My dress was black, simple, and a little too snug. It had been years since I had to dress for a formal funeral. I was standing at the back of the cemetery service, trying to blend in, even though I knew half the eyes were already on me. People stared like I was something foreign dropped into a photograph that should have been picture perfect. I wasn't a Monroe by blood, and for some of them, that was all that ever mattered. The casket gleamed under the sun. Polished mahogany, draped with lilies, her favorite. Celia Monroe was a woman of taste, money, and quiet, commanding power. And she was gone. She took me in when I was 5, after a wreck on I-285 near Atlanta took both my birth parents. It happened on a rainy night. A semi lost control and they were gone before emergency services arrived. I don't remember the crash, but I remember the sound of my foster home door creaking open the day Celia walked in. She didn't smile, not much anyway. She wasn't warm like other moms. She was reserved, elegant, and raised me like the child she might have had if life had turned out differently. Her husband, Gerald, was still alive then. I remember his laughter echoing in the halls and the way he'd ruffle my hair when he passed by. When he died of a sudden heart attack, I was 12. Celia changed. She wore her grief like a shawl she never took off, and for years afterward, the house was a silent museum of routines and discipline. She didn't hug often. But when I got the flu and couldn't stop shaking, she slept beside me for 3 nights straight. When I got my first heartbreak, she sat beside me in silence and made tea. She was never loud in love, but it was there. Or at least I thought it was. That certainty cracked during the funeral, when Aunt Marla leaned in and whispered the words that would haunt me for weeks, "You don't belong here anyway." At first, I thought I misheard her. I looked at her, confused, but she didn't blink. "She raised me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She pitied you," Marla replied, her mouth curling into something between a sneer and a smile. "She never loved you." There was something so calm about the way she said it. Like it was simply a fact I needed to accept, like gravity or time. It nearly undid me. The rest of the funeral blurred. I stood still while others wept, hugged, whispered condolences, and filtered out to the Monroe family estate. That place was practically a museum, every piece of furniture older than me, portraits lining the hallways, walls thick with oil paint and legacy. I avoided the main rooms and slipped upstairs to the old bedroom Celia had once made mine. It hadn't changed in years. Still smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They didn't look like hers. Not even close. What if Marla was right? What if I had just been a charity case? A daily reminder that she couldn't have her own child? I didn't know what to think anymore. Then, a knock. Pierce, Marla's son, stepped in holding a leather-bound notebook. I hadn't seen him in years, not since we were teenagers. He had always been the golden boy. Private schools, Ivy League, internships with politicians, golf with CEOs. If there was a Monroe heir, it was him. He stood there awkwardly. "I think you should see this," he said. "It's Celia's journal. Found it when helping with her legal affairs last week." I took it with hesitation. The leather was cracked and soft. The initials CM were faint in gold lettering. I didn't open it right away. Pierce didn't press. He just left. Back downstairs, people were gathering for the reading. I didn't want to go. I hated the idea of watching people's faces light up or fall based on what they were or weren't getting. But I owed it to Celia, or maybe to myself, to hear it. The lawyer, a man named Merton who always looked like he was holding in a sigh, began the reading. Her money was divided in a dozen directions. A large portion went to charities, another to historical preservation, and a fund for single mothers. Her jewelry was to be auctioned off to support literacy programs. But then came the house. The estate. The paintings. The land. Everything material that made the Monroes. All of it was left to me. The room went dead silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I didn't react. I couldn't. Marla looked ready to spit fire. "That girl isn't even family," she hissed to Merton. Others chimed in under their breath. "She brainwashed Celia. Manipulated her when she was vulnerable. She's not one of us." I didn't speak. My mouth was dry and my heart was racing. Was this what Celia wanted? Or had she made a mistake? Then Pierce stood up. He held the journal out in front of him. "Before anyone says more, you should hear this," he said. He began reading. The words were Celia's. Written in her unmistakable careful script. Her voice came back to me through his. "Ramona saved me from becoming a woman hollowed by grief. She gave my life structure again after Gerald died. She is the only person I trust to carry our legacy, not because of duty or blood, but because she has heart. She is the only one who ever made this house feel like a home again." People shifted in their chairs. Some looked away. "I know they'll call her an outsider. I know they'll resent my choices. But I've spent my whole life following rules I never wrote. I will not let anyone decide for me what love looks like. Ramona is mine." I closed my eyes. There it was. The words I never got to hear from her mouth in life. The room was still. Even Marla had gone quiet. Pierce handed me the journal. No ceremony, no smile. Just a nod. I clutched it like a lifeline. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. People offered stiff condolences, some genuine, some performative. A few left early. Marla didn't say another word to me. Later that night, I sat in Celia's study. Her chair still smelled like her perfume, amber and sandalwood. The moonlight crept through the tall windows and danced on the floor. I opened the journal again, flipping through pages filled with her thoughts, confessions, fears, and love. She loved me. Not out of pity. But out of choice. I stayed up reading her words, some funny, some heartbreaking, until the sun began to rise over the trees. And I realized I hadn't cried all day, not because I wasn't sad, but because, for the first time, I felt seen. The day after the funeral, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that only old Southern estates know, thick, oppressive, full of ghosts. The staff had been let go for the week. I was alone in the house Celia left me. And I still didn't know if I wanted it. It wasn't that I didn't love the place. I did. Every staircase and every creaky floorboard held a memory. But it was also a house soaked in judgment. It had watched me grow, yes, but also watched the way people like Marla treated me. Like I was on borrowed time. I went into the dining room to find the long mahogany table bare for the first time in weeks. It had been set for guests and lawyers and distant family members just the day before. Now, nothing. Just a dust ring where the flower arrangement had been. Celia always liked order. She believed appearances mattered, not in a vain way, but in the way someone who'd been underestimated all her life does. She had grown up poor and married rich. Gerald came from a long line of Charleston money. Celia had to prove herself every step of the way. I think that's part of why she took me in. Not just out of grief, but because she saw a little of herself in me, someone who'd been overlooked. But not everyone understood 11D that. I got a call around 9 a.m. the next morning. It was from an unknown number, but I picked it up anyway. "Ramona," the voice said. "It's Sylvie." It took me a moment. Sylvie was Celia's cousin, the family's unofficial record keeper. She lived 2 towns over and rarely made appearances. But when she did, she remembered everything. Birthdays, recipes, rumors, she held it all in her mind like a vault. "I want to talk," she said. And not on the phone. That afternoon, I drove to her house in Mount Pleasant. Small, ivy-covered, a porch swing creaking in the wind. She met me at the door with 2 glasses of sweet tea and a look that said she knew more than she should. "Come on in," she said. "I figured after the funeral, you might want some truth." Her living room smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. Framed photos lined every wall. She pointed to one in particular, a black and white photo of Celia as a teenager, her hand on the shoulder of a boy who looked like he could be her brother. "That's not Gerald," I said, staring. "No," Sylvie replied. "That's Mason. Her first love. Died in Vietnam. She never really talked about him." I looked at the picture more closely. Celia had that same guarded smile she wore for most of her life. "She was different back then," Sylvie said. "Funny. Sharp. A little wild." I stayed quiet. "I know what Marla said to you," Sylvie added after a pause. "She's always been jealous. Even before you came along." "Jealous of what?" Celia made something of herself. Didn't wait around for a man to rescue her. She took charge, built a life. Then, when she took you in, Marla couldn't stand that either. Said it was selfish, raising someone else's child just so she could play house. "That's not how it was," I said quickly. "I know. But Marla never cared for the truth." Sylvie leaned forward. "You remind me more of Celia than anyone else in that family. You walk like her. Think like her." She might not have said it often, but I was around enough to see it. She handed me a letter. The envelope was sealed, Celia's handwriting neat on the front, "For Ramona, open when you're ready." I didn't open it there. I slipped it into my purse and drove back to the estate as the sun dipped low behind the trees. By the time I got back, Pierce was waiting outside. He looked out of place, sitting on the marble steps in jeans and a plain t-shirt, drinking a bottle of water. "Didn't expect you to come back," I said. "I figured you'd need help with the paperwork," he said. "The estate transition isn't going to be easy. Marla's already stirring things up with some cousins. She's saying she'll contest the will." I sat beside him. "She can try. The lawyer said everything's in order." Pierce nodded. "She's not expecting to win. She just wants to make it ugly." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not speaking up sooner. When my mom said what she did at the funeral. I should have said something right away." I shrugged. "You did what mattered. You gave me her journal." Pierce looked down at his shoes. "She really did love you, you know. I was around enough to see it. You made her lighter. I didn't even think she could be like that." "I didn't always feel it," I admitted. "Yeah, she wasn't exactly warm. But she showed up," I said. "Every time. When I broke my arm, when I failed math in 8th grade, when I didn't get into Duke. She never said it, but she never walked away either. That counts for something." That night, after Pierce left, I sat at Celia's old desk with the envelope Sylvie gave me. My fingers trembled a little as I opened it. The letter inside was handwritten, dated about 6 months before she passed. "Ramona, if you're reading this, I've probably left things unsaid. That's my fault. I was never good at saying what mattered most. I came from a home where feelings were meant to be swallowed, not shared. But you deserve to know the truth. You were never a burden. Never a project. Never a shadow of what I couldn't have. You were the greatest choice I ever made. If people try to convince you otherwise, let them talk. Let them fester in their bitterness. You and I know better. This house, this family name, none of it means anything without someone to give it meaning. That someone is you. Don't let the Monroes define you. Redefine them. Love, Celia." I read it again. And again. Until I felt something in my chest loosen. The narrative I'd been told, that I didn't belong, that I was a charity case, wasn't hers. It was theirs. It was Marla's. Celia's truth was something else entirely. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into its envelope, then into the drawer of her desk where she kept her most personal things. And for the first time since the funeral, I breathed without guilt. The next few days passed slowly, like thick molasses sliding off a spoon. I stayed in the house, wandering from room to room, each one echoing with the weight of memories that weren't entirely mine, but had been shared with me by proximity. I cleaned out Celia's closets, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. Her clothes still smelled like her. Silk scarves, linen blouses, the subtle perfume she always wore. I sat on the floor of her walk-in closet for over an hour, holding a pale blue sweater to my face, trying not to fall apart. There were stacks of old photographs tucked away in shoeboxes. Most of them were black and white, snapshots from Gerald's business trips, family reunions, even a few of me as a little girl at Christmas. There was one of me in a red velvet dress, maybe 6 years old, Celia kneeling beside me to tie my shoe. I don't remember the photo being taken, but I stared at it for a long time. Behind the boxes, I found a metal file box. Inside, there were legal documents, copies of Celia's marriage license, Gerald's death certificate, property deeds, and an old letter, postmarked from 1993, the year after I came to live with them. It was addressed to Celia in handwriting I didn't recognize. Celia, you're doing a good thing, but don't let guilt be your compass. Ramona is not a replacement. She's not yours to shape into something you lost. Don't do this because you feel sorry for her. Love her if you must, but do it honestly. I couldn't stop looking at that last initial. M. It could have been Mason, the man Sylvie said she loved before Gerald. Or maybe someone else. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I didn't know the whole story. What I did know was that even back then, people had opinions about me and Celia, about whether or not our relationship was real. And still, she had chosen to keep me. That night, I opened the journal again. Her entries weren't always poetic. Some were just lists of errands. Some rants about guests who overstayed their welcome. But occasionally, her words bled emotion. One entry stopped me cold. Ramona asked me if I would have adopted her even if I could have had children. I told her I didn't know how to answer. But I've been thinking about it ever since. The answer is yes. Yes. Because she sees me. Because she sits with me in silence when I need it. Because she isn't afraid of my sharp edges. Because when she walks into a room, the house feels less empty. Yes. I had been 12 when I asked her that. I barely remembered it. But she remembered. And she answered, in ink if not in voice. The next day, I had breakfast at the small kitchen table that no one but Celia and I ever used. It overlooked the garden. The roses were blooming again. She had always loved those roses, white with pink centers. I should have cut them back months ago, but hadn't had the heart. As I picked at some toast, my phone buzzed. A text from Pierce, we need to talk. Aunt Marla's making moves. I met him that afternoon at a coffee shop just off King Street. He looked tired. More worn down than I remembered. She's filed a formal petition to dispute the will, he said without any preamble. On what grounds? Emotional manipulation. Mental decline. She's arguing that Celia wasn't of sound mind when she named you. I blinked. That's ridiculous. It is. But the burden of proof will be on us. Us. That word struck me. He wasn't obligated to help me. But he had stuck around. That meant something. She's pulling strings, he went on. Getting in touch with cousins, even people who haven't talked to Celia in years. She's trying to paint you as an opportunist. I let out a bitter laugh. Because of course I manipulated a dying woman into giving me the only home I've ever known. Pierce looked uncomfortable. I know it's crap. But she's loud. And this family listens to the loudest voice. I'm not giving this up, Pierce. I'll fight it. I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm saying you might need help. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thumb drive. What's that? Celia's lawyer had security footage from the estate. From last year. It includes hours of conversation between you and Celia. Some of it, she's talking to you like a mother. Not like a patient. Not like a woman being coerced. Like a mom. It's evidence. I stared at him. Why are you doing this? He hesitated. Because you deserve to keep what she gave you. And, because I've spent my life watching that side of the family eat itself alive trying to control each other. You're the only one who ever bought something good into that house. I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. That night, I watched the videos. They were boring, mostly. Us sitting on the patio, sipping tea. Her instructing me how to prune her roses. A few moments of us folding linens together, organizing books. But then there was one where I was sitting beside her, holding her hand. She looked thin, frail, but her voice was still sharp. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Don't let them take this house. They're not going to. I know they'll try. But you have to fight. I will. You're stronger than them, Ramona. Because you don't need to prove anything. I paused the video. My breath caught. She had known. She had seen this coming. She had trusted me to weather the storm. The storm had come, and I was still here. The next morning, I started organizing everything. I called the lawyer. Sent him the letter, the journal, the videos. I wasn't just going to defend my place in Celia's life, I was going to defend her memory. People like Marla had spent their lives trading favors and influence like currency. They thought legacy was about bloodlines and last names. But Celia had made it clear. Legacy is about who you choose. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared. I wasn't born into money or legacy, and I didn't have the benefit of family loyalty. What I did have, however, was Celia's voice, her intentions, her handwriting, her journal, her videos, and the quiet fire she had lit in me over the years. And I had Pierce. He showed up every other day with legal updates, timelines, and transcripts. He had gone through hours of video footage, compiling clips that showed how clear and consistent Celia had been in her decision to name me as her heir. Not once had she seemed confused or pressured. She was firm. Steady. Loving. Marla's formal challenge went public within the Monroe family circle. A few of them called me, some politely asking what was going on, others veiled their insults under concern. I'm just not sure why Celia didn't leave the estate to someone with, family history. She was probably just tired, dear. These decisions can get so emotional. I didn't argue. I simply referred them to Merton, Celia's lawyer, and ended the conversations with calm neutrality. I wasn't going to fight them on their turf, the gossip, the passive aggression, the side-taking. I had chosen a different path. But the real blow came when I hosted the first event at the estate since the funeral. It was a scholarship gala. Celia had left behind the seed of a fund for underprivileged young women, girls who, like me, had lost parents and were placed into a system that wasn't built to care. I matched her original endowment with the money I inherited, then partnered with a nonprofit to expand it. We called it the Celia Monroe Legacy Grant. I invited the whole family, but I knew most of them wouldn't come. It wasn't their kind of event. Marla, however, did show up. She wore a tight black suit and a forced smile. Her presence drew eyes. Her reputation followed her like perfume, strong, a bit sour, hard to ignore. She made her way to me near the bar, drink in hand, already halfway finished. Quite the performance, Ramona, she said, lips tight. It's a celebration, I replied. Not a performance. You think this little event makes you part of the family? I'm not trying to be part of the family. I'm honoring Celia. That's the difference between us. She scoffed. Enjoy it while it lasts. A judge will see through this little fairy tale you built. I didn't flinch. Funny. Because my lawyer already filed a countersuit for defamation and undue stress. It'll be public if it goes to court. That shut her up for a second. And in case it does, I added, we have Celia's medical reports, video recordings, voice memos, and a notarized letter from her doctor stating she was of sound mind until the very end. Her mouth tightened. She didn't blink. Her pride wouldn't let her show it, but I could see it, the first crack in her armor. Is this your idea of revenge? She asked. No, I said, smiling slightly. This is me protecting what she built. And what she gave to me, because she loved me. Because she chose me. I walked away before she could answer. Later that night, I made a quiet toast during the gala, standing beside a framed photo of Celia in her garden. I was never her blood, I said. But she raised me. She shaped me. She made me who I am. This house, this foundation, this legacy, it's not just hers. It's ours. The room applauded, warm and real. No grandeur, no spectacle. Just quiet recognition. That was enough for me. The court hearing never happened. A week later, Merton called to tell me Marla had dropped the petition. She cited a desire to avoid further division in the family, but we both knew the truth. She had no case. She had only her bitterness, and bitterness doesn't hold up well in court. What's more, Pierce called to say his mother had received a formal warning from the state bar after she attempted to pressure Celia's doctor into recanting his statement. There would be no charges, no scandal. But her reputation? That was another story. Word got around. The family stopped calling. And honestly, I didn't miss them. Over time, the house started to feel like mine. I repainted the study. Donated some of the older artwork to the Charleston Museum. I kept Celia's garden the way she liked it, trimming her roses on Sundays, just as she taught me. I still read her journal sometimes. I still play the recordings. And I keep the letter in my nightstand drawer. Pierce visits often. We're not siblings, but we found a kind of kinship in the rubble of all this. He told me he's thinking of moving back to Charleston permanently. Feels like home here now, he said one afternoon, coffee in hand as we sat on the back porch. I know what you mean, I replied. There's still work to do. The scholarship program is growing. I'm organizing a mentorship network for young women aging out of foster care. The estate is a living space again, less a museum, more a home. Sometimes people ask me how I held it together after everything, after the funeral, the betrayal, the attack on my character. And I tell them this, I didn't fight back with rage. I fought back with purpose. And that, in the end, was enough.